Good evening, my friends. This is Paul, and today I'm going to be reviewing to you Sonic Origins Plus for the Nintendo Switch. Just as Sonic Mania got a Plus expansion a year after its release, now Sega is doing the same thing with Sonic Origins. I hope Sonic Superstars is just flat out good from the get-go, and we don't need to add a whole bunch of stuff a year later to make it the definitive edition. Before we get into the content of the package, I want to make a few things clear if you're on the fence about whether to buy it digitally or physically, or what to do if you already have Sonic Origins. First off, if you've already owned Sonic Origins, you can get the additional stuff that I'm talking about for $10 on the eShop if you purchase the Plus expansion, which comes with all of the previous DLC, and no, you don't get a refund if you already bought it, so yay, Sega. And if you get the physical version, you're gonna need a download code to add the Plus expansion onto the package. Now, whether the physical version gives you all of the DLC off the bat or not, I'm not really sure, but I know for a fact the download code applies to Amy and the Game Gear games. So that's a bit unfortunate if you're like me and you rent a lot of games from Gamefly, so be very careful about asking, say, a store associate if you're getting a new copy, like, hey, does this have the download code? Or if you're getting it used, if that still applies. Since Sega spared us from this monstrosity, thanks to just having the DLC all in one package to further add insult to those of us who actually bought some of the stuff, I'll quickly go over the DLC before we jump into the big attraction. Some of the things you get with the additional money are new letterbox backgrounds when you're playing the Game Gear games, as well as the original games in classic mode, some hard missions, which are so stupidly hard that I can't beat them. I'm not very good at Sonic games to begin with, but these make me look really bad at them. Some additional music tracks, which are basically the entire soundtracks of Sonic 3D Blast, Sonic Spinball, and Knuckles Chaotix. Now, they say remastered on the eShop, but they didn't sound remastered to me. Maybe I just have a bad ear. You also get the ability to pan and zoom around the islands in the background and see these really cute 3D renderings of these classic Sonic enemies and locations. I like the attention to detail, like on the Sonic 3 island being able to see the spinning barrel, or seeing the blue tubes from the chemical plant zone in the Sonic 2 one, but the novelty wears off after a couple of seconds. And the final edition, which why they locked this behind a paywall, I don't know, is you can change which characters appear on the bottom right of the screen when you're playing a song. Yay. Now let's move on to the big stuff. First off, let's talk about the Game Gear games. They're horrible. There's no way of sugarcoating it. Unlike the original 4 games, which were upscaled in HD, had a few quality of life improvements, and had an anniversary mode, the Game Gear titles add none of that. They're literally straight emulations of the original games. From what I've heard, they're even worse than they were on the original Game Gear, especially in the sound department. Like in the games where the game shouts Sega, you know, it was nice and clear on the Genesis. Oh boy, does it sound compressed and really bad. The music is also pretty awful. That could just be my tastes with classic game music, but I generally could not see why my best friend found enjoyment out of these games when they were in Sonic Gems collection. You do have the option to save wherever you want and reload that save, but on Switch Online and Virtual Console, when you would reload into a previous save state or use the rewind, you'd see a frame of what it is you're rewinding to. Not in this game. If you forgot where you saved, too bad. And especially because a lot of the areas and locations in this game blend together, it can sometimes make you wonder if you made any progress at all because everything looks so similar. The games have a ridiculous amount of screen crunch, and it is very hard to see where you're going, especially in the ones that are flat-out 2D platformers that are trying to be like the Genesis games, but are inferior in literally every way. There's also weird annoyances that are just there that don't necessarily have to be there. Like, sometimes you can walk past a spring, but you won't, like, actually jump on it. You have to jump precisely at the right angle. When you're flying with Tails, you have to be standing, press up on the control stick, then press the jump button to get in a flight animation. And unlike in the Genesis games where you see him getting tired when he flies too much, the game just stops abruptly. It doesn't give you any indication that he's flown long enough. There are a few games that are different than just Sonic platformers, but worse, as there's the two Sonic Drift games, which are very mediocre and flat racing games that somehow even make Super Mario Kart look like a masterpiece. There's Sonic Labyrinth, which was the game that was infamous for bragging that Sonic was slow. Basically, it's Sonic 3D Blast, but worse, as Sonic moves at a snail's pace, and you have to make him go into a spin dash in order to get any sense of momentum, but then he sometimes has too much momentum, and so it's really hard to tell where he's going, especially with the screen crunch. There are two games that star Tails, but they're both really odd spin-offs that don't make a whole lot of sense. Like, why does Tails have to carry a ring with him everywhere in Tails Sky Patrol? Why is it that Tails doesn't curl up into a ball in Tails Adventures? Why does he have to use gadgets? Why is it that at one point the game soft-locked me out of using his gadgets and I didn't know which button to replace them? That could have just been my fault for not looking at the controls. But why did the game have to be built like that in the first place? I couldn't even get past level 1, that's how poorly it was designed. The only game in the Game Gear collection that was even remotely passable was Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine. But at this point, you might as well just play several ways of preserving that game, such as Sonic Mega Collection or the Sega Genesis Classics Collection. The Genesis version has so much more personality and better sound effects. It has some writing, not that that makes much of a difference, but it feels like the absolute bare minimum of Puyo Puyo gameplay without any of the style and charm that later entries have. Now that we've gotten past that doom and gloom, let's get on to what is it like to control Amy. If playing the Game Gear games just wasn't your cup of tea, one thing that might excite you about the Plus expansion pack is that Amy Rose, the damsel in distress in Sonic CD, is now playable in all 4 of the original titles. In the case of Sonic 3 and Sonic 2, you can also have Amy playable with Tails, in addition to Knuckles finally being playable in Sonic CD. Took them long enough. And so, the question is her playstyle unique and different enough to truly feel like a brand new way to experience these classic games? Well, let's start out with what makes Amy different. When she's in the air, you can hold down the jump button to make her spin her hammer around. This is essentially a longer-ranged full-body attack. In the Sonic games, whatever character you were controlling would roll up in a ball, and due to the nature of, Sonic being covered in spikes, that would damage the opponents. With the hammer, you have more range of attack. I also think the hammer is more powerful than a typical attack from Amy, because when I was fighting those bosses, it felt like they went down way faster than they did in my original playthroughs. She can also do a hammer rush if you hold down the jump button when she lands, and then she just runs forward in a burst of speed and keeps hitting her hammer. This can be used to attack enemies without having to jump on them or spin dash them. And sometimes her hammer can even break walls that normally would have to be spin dashed, if that's a word, through. Sadly, they cannot be used to access Knuckles-only sections in Sonic 3. This may sound fun in principle, but it doesn't add a whole lot to the original games. It actually kind of makes you feel like you're just playing Sonic, but with more range in your jump attacks. Sonic CD is already a mess of a game, and I had a miserable time playing it with Tails, who, can fly, so you'd think he'd be able to cheese the levels. But nope, it was still annoying. I thought maybe playing as Knuckles would help. That was annoying. Trying to play the classic games with Amy was also a horrible experience, because you weren't able to skip the frustrating parts of the levels that playing as Tails or Knuckles would allow you to do. Maybe I'm just bad at Sonic games, but I would think that each individual character gives you a unique way to play, And Amy just gives you a unique way to fight the bosses, really. That's like the biggest thing I can say about her. The biggest positive I had in this experience was being able to play Sonic the Hedgehog 3 in a new way for the first time in pretty much ever. Because I've played Sonic 3 in nearly every single iteration it's ever been re-released in, and this is the first time it's ever been remastered in HD and has a new character, so it felt like it was the first time I was ever able to play a full ROM hack that's actually official. But even then, it didn't change much of my actual playstyle. I still used a lot of the same tricks that I would have done in a typical Sonic playthrough, just the bosses went by a lot faster, and I was able to gain more momentum by using Amy's Hammer Rush. It just wasn't a substantial enough addition to make her part of the box art and to pay an additional $10 for. It was just a neat way to replay Sonic 3, but did I really need that excuse to do it? Well, yeah, Sonic 3 is amazing, but I shouldn't need to pay $10 additional just for a single new character and some really lame Game Gear games. Now, if you're a completionist, there's also the surprise option by the mission mode that gives you little mini objectives to fill in a Sonic birthday party illustration. I never completed this because some of them were really hard, such as saving the future in Sonic CD with Knuckles and clear the special stage. No thanks, I haven't even beaten one of those special stages. And I'm also not a completionist, so doing things on a checklist for the sake of achievements is just not my kind of thing. But knowing how butchered Sonic Origins has been so far, I would not be surprised if your only reward is that illustration and you don't get like a cool new music track or a bonus level or anything cool. Sonic Origins Plus was a massive disappointment. The Game Gear titles did not seem to just get better because I had better gaming skills over time, as I thought was possible after disliking them in Sonic Gems Collection. They sounded horrible, played horrible, had way too much screen crunch, and didn't give you any anniversary options besides the ability to use save states, but without the added details that the Virtual Console and Switch Online ports had. I can't believe I'm defending Switch Online, so you know you messed up when I have to defend that. And playing as Amy didn't add much. In the case of all of the games except for Sonic 3 and Knuckles, it reminded me why I hated those games in their original forms, and why I vastly preferred later versions letting you play as Tails and Knuckles to skip certain annoying parts, like the Labyrinth Zone. Sonic 3 was the only one I was actually able to finish with Amy, and even then, it just felt like an easier Sonic run. It didn't substantially alter the gameplay experience. If I had to make a suggestion, it would be let Amy enter those Knuckles exclusive areas. Maybe add more springs so that she can climb up the walls. But like, that would at least make the game different enough, where you would have to challenge yourself to tackle those Knuckles missions in a new way because Amy doesn't have the gliding and the jumping. That would have been incredible. But they couldn't do it. They also couldn't program in a Amy and Sonic or an Amy and Knuckles mode like the And Knuckles mode did in Sonic Mania, or the Encore mode where literally any combination of characters could be together. Overall, I think you should save your money. If you've never gotten Sonic Origins before, and you're wondering if you should just pick it up in its fullness because you want to experience these classic games, I would say yes, but don't get the Plus expansion. It really is not worth it unless you really want to play super old and really bad Sonic games. The base game of Sonic Origins is fine depending on how much you like the games. When I put it on my best and worst games of 2022 list, it made both of the lists because I liked playing through Sonic 2 and Sonic 3 again, but I didn't like playing through Sonic 1 and Sonic CD. So depending on how much you like those classic games, I do think Sonic Origins is at least worth a rent so that you can get a little bit of goodness. It's worth a buy if you really like those orchestra excerpts that they have in the museum. But otherwise, don't spend the extra money. Just get the base game of Sonic Origins, have some fun, give it back, and hopefully wait for Sonic Superstars to actually be a good, competent Sonic game that's finished from release date. So with that, thank you very much for watching. Let me know down in the comments what you think. Again, I do read and respond to 99% of my comments, so I hope you won't be shy about sharing your thoughts. Special thanks to my patrons Matthew Rakowski, Spoon Ghost, Splatcat, and Scooterdoodles for their financial contributions. And until the next time, remember to keep the faith, stay epic, and God bless. Bye!